You're still watching The Pulse on the Joy News channel on Multi TV. My name is Francis Aban. Now, some election observers from neighboring Francophone countries are cautioning Ghanaians not to do anything that will plunge this country into chaos as the general elections approach. At a peer review meeting today, some of the observers shared experiences from other countries where little misunderstanding created violence. They concluded that Ghana has earned the respect of the sub-region with its peaceful elections over the years. Executive Director of Gori Institute, a monitoring organization, Dudu Dia, tells Joy News the Electoral Commission must come to a consensus with parties involved in all decisions to avoid chaos.
Ghana is a country which deeply we have an anchorage in terms of democracy, because it's quite an example both in Africa, I do not say in West Africa, but thanks to the fact that we have a stability of institutions. And now stability of institution is one thing, leadership is one thing, but we need to work more in terms of how to raise the voice of citizens, how to make able the citizens to be much more in front of the line, because we think that Africa must be protagonist of its own future.
I kept hammering the fact that Ghana should not take the peace that we are enjoying for granted, and that because sub-Saharan Africa, everyone is looking up to us. Have you seen anything in your monitoring so far, reason why you have to keep hammering this particular concern?
So I think anywhere you do not find a country, especially in West Africa, where you have the elections linked to perfect situations. What I mean here, in some countries, elections, after election you have like political crisis. I can give the example of Guinea-Bissau. What I mean is elections in terms of law can be critical also. But here I think Ghana is a peaceful country. Here I think we have one step more. Instead of talking about consolidation of democracy in Ghana, we need to talk about deepening democracy in Ghana.
Our Electoral Commission has been bedeviled with a lot of court cases. As a result, the Electoral Commission today has not even issued notice of polls for the presidential candidates. Which should have been done as of now. We have a few days to go for the elections. And so everybody is kind of agitated. Are we going to vote? Are we not going to vote? Is that a recipe for some kind of chaos, you think?
So all that I say, I think to have good elections, you need a minimum of consensus between the key stakeholders. The key stakeholders are the electoral commissions, the political parties, and the CSOs. I think we need to look for consensus. I think here, everywhere the problematic is how to make the link between political science and what I say, the law. You know, there is sometimes confrontation between laws and politics. And I think in order to guarantee the stability, the best thing is to see in which way we can have a consensus about these situations.
And talking about the country's elections, I will shortly head to the Electoral Commission to bring you an update on what's been happening. We know that an announcement will be made before 6 p.m. today on which candidates have made it successfully for balloting, which we're learning will happen tomorrow at the EC headquarters. We'll bring you details on that in just a moment. But yes, you can see him on the background. He is smiling, and it's true. Republican candidate Donald Trump is the 45th president-elect of the United States of America. The underdog beat the bookmaker's choice, Democrat candidate Hillary Clinton, in what has caused global markets to tremble and left political watchers pretty stunned. We'll get into how this happened, but let's hear from the man of the moment. He's smiling, but he's talking about uniting his country after winning the elections.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States, Donald Trump.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory. And I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign. I mean, she fought very hard. Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be president for all Americans, and this is so important to me. For those who have chosen not to support me in the past, of which there were a few people, I'm reaching out to you for your guidance and your help so that we can work together and unify our great country. Working together, we will begin the urgent task of rebuilding our nation and renewing the American dream. It's been what they call a historic event, but to be really historic, we have to do a great job. And I promise you that I will not let you down. We will do a great job. We will do a great job. And I can only say that while the campaign is over, our work on this movement is now really just beginning.
And while the announcement of him winning has sent shockwaves that have been of disappointment for the avid supporters of this woman, Hillary Clinton, and it's even transcended to a flood of supporters virtually swimming and wailing in their tears.
Different than it was a few hours ago when people were happy and relaxed. I have been looking around the room at people who are stone-faced. Some of them have been crying. We have seen people leaving the venue, including some who have been sitting on the risers behind the podium where Hillary Clinton is supposed to speak. There are people who are just in shock. I've seen mouths open as folks here in the audience are watching the results come in, many of them with their arms crossed and a hand to their mouth. They are just stunned as they watch what is going on here. It's just been a complete reversal from what we saw a few hours ago. And what they are watching is various networks, as we're seeing these calls being made for different states. They've been monitoring, a lot of them, their iPhones, seeing certainly the projections for what is going to happen. And they are just stunned at the idea that they were completely sure they were coming to this event for what they thought would be even an early night to celebrate Hillary Clinton becoming the first female president, and now they are confronting the reality that they could be walking out of here either not knowing but perhaps expecting that Donald Trump is going to become president. I mean, you're seeing it here on these faces. They are just stunned. People who were talking and laughing before are standing there not talking to the folks that they came with.
Well, here in Ghana, the scene at the U.S. Embassy has been a very somber one. It was not all celebratory. U.S. Ambassador to Ghana, Robert Jackson, was a man of few words today.
Our Africa policy has changed very little over the last several decades, so I am not expecting significant changes in the U.S. relationship with Ghana. I expect that our assistance programs will continue pretty much as they are. The Young African Leaders Initiative is already funded for the coming year, so I would expect that to continue. The variations that I think we're likely to see are more in relationship to the larger world powers, and I have no doubt be hearing more about the relationship with NATO and some of our other alliances as the president-elect puts his new team together and they make policy proposals and develop a coherent strategy.
So that's the U.S. Ambassador to Ghana, Robert Jackson, saying that this win for Trump will not change the United States foreign policy for Africa and Ghana specific. We'll surely begin to analyze what has happened, but let's quickly remind ourselves of just how we have all been, to put it simply, been trumped.
into this night, where do we stand?
This is where we stood coming into the night, 268 to 204, so clearly an advantage for Secretary Clinton.
Take a look here. If Donald Trump wins tonight, no matter who they voted for, take a look at these numbers here. 21% say they'll be concerned. 37% say they'll be scared.
This is what both candidates want. They want to be living there starting January 20th of next year. Florida has been going back and forth, just changed again. It's only 11,000 vote lead just now. It changed.
Math on your feet. I like this.
The Empire State Building in New York City. Take a look at our running tally, the electoral vote. Anderson, this night is turning out to be a real nail-biter.
All along, the Trump campaign has been saying that Florida's a must-win for them. And I mean,
they can't win without it.
Donald Trump will carry the state of Florida.
You know, I'm guessing that the people in Brooklyn, I can see their fingers
That's
probably.
the Hillary Clinton headquarters.
Yeah, fingers probably bleeding because there's no more nail to bite.
I wouldn't call anything encouraging for Hillary Clinton at the moment, to be honest with you, my friend.
Wolf, the scene here is so different than it was a few hours ago when people were happy and relaxed. I have been looking around the room at people who are stone-faced. Some of them have been crying.
This was a white lash against a changing country. It was a white lash against a black president.
This is the people rising up saying it's time to listen to us. It's time to listen to us in Michigan and Wisconsin and work for the people.
Right then, so that's just a quick wrap of what we've seen from yesterday up until this morning. We're learning that Hillary Clinton has delivered a concession speech after congratulating Donald Trump in the early hours of today. Let's now begin to analyze what we've seen and what the outcome of the American elections means for various strands, finances, the African-American community, and also for immigration issues. We can speak to Dr. Jemima Nunu. She's an international relations expert, and I'm certain that she spent some time monitoring what happened in the American elections. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Nunu, today.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me.
Okay, let's begin first of all with your initial thoughts. Are you surprised, like many we know, that Donald Trump is now president-elect for the United States?
I'd be lying to say that I wasn't surprised initially. I was. But on deeper reflection, more sobering reflection, it shouldn't have come as such a surprise to people such as myself that should have looked at the patterns. Especially if you look at what's going on in the global context, it shouldn't have been such a surprise.
Wow, I haven't heard this. Why aren't you surprised? What patterns are you referring to here?
I mean, if you look at the whole issues of globalization, yeah, and a lot of these issues to do with migration or immigration, to do with nation states' place in the global world, you'll see that globalization has many, it's called discontents. And that's what we're seeing being played out in moves like Brexit, and now we have Trump in, and all these kinds of movements where you have seemingly unlikely, I say seemingly, but on deeper analysis, it might not be so unseeming, because what Trump represents has resonated with the majority of Americans. And what does he represent? He represents a person that is willing to stand up and say some things many of us liberals may find unpalatable, but still is the reality for many of the voters on the ground. So I think we need to also look and wake up to some of those feelings, emotions, other realities, and actually have an open conversation about why people like Donald Trump, movements such as Brexit, have managed to resonate with so many people.
Okay, so am I to understand by what you just mentioned that we may have seen ourselves get it wrong with polls for Brexit, also not seeing Trump's win coming along like many polls we have seen in the past? Is it because we are not beginning to accept a certain reality you speak of?
I do think so. I think so. And the fact of the matter is that we shouldn't be swept away with media, opinion polls, etc., which do not reflect what I term as is a silent majority. Many people that voted for Trump perhaps would not be openly expressive of it, may not come out and say, oh yeah, I proudly vote for Trump, but they agree with his sentiments, they agree with his policies, they agree with his statements. And I am not of the category that they're all sexist or racist or whatever. There are indeed elements of that, yeah? There are elements of that, exactly. But I think that we should not be so quick to dismiss people's realities and try and engage them and try and understand rather than labeling certain people.
Okay, because talk of labels, we know so many names have been ascribed to him. Him being a racist, him being a sexist, being a protectionist. All these things we had in the run-up, and there were quite some facts adduced to support that argument. You're saying that it doesn't matter for the ordinary American if the ex-president will be in these respects?
I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. But in a hierarchy of priorities, they've clearly stated that that isn't their priority. Yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I mean, you know, personally, I find some of the things that have been ascribed to him that he's allegedly done, and some of the things indeed he said, very unacceptable. But I think people have a priority of needs. And some of them, okay, he may not be perfect. He may say some unpalatable things. He may have done certain things. But hey, this man speaks for me. He represents me. These are my thoughts. Or these are my feelings. This is how I think we should make our nation. This is how I think our nation, the direction our nation should be going. And I've read articles recently on this. It's almost like a backlash to the perceived view of the liberals, where they're in their cushy, elite, very insulated lives, trying to dictate to the masses how they should live, what their reality should be, when indeed it's not that. So this you can see as a form of backlash.
Okay. Interesting. Now, let's begin to analyze some of the elements in this. And we've seen the reactions coming after the announcement was done. One of the issues that's coming up now is one that was expressed by one of the panelists today on CNN about what this means for the African-American community. I just want us to watch that briefly, and then we will continue with that leg of the conversation.
You know, I hear the exit polls about this being sort of disaffected economic protests, and I get that. I think what I'm feeling and what I hear from, you know, friends across the country is.
Well, look, first of all, you know, congratulations. Both of you guys were.
We're not there yet.
Well, you're further than anybody said you would be. And I have enough class, and I was raised well enough to say, when you outdo,
yes, sir. Thank you.
When you outdo expectations, you know, good for you. But there's another side to this. People have talked about a miracle. I'm hearing about a nightmare. It's hard to be a parent tonight for a lot of us. You tell your kids, don't be a bully. You tell your kids, don't be a bigot. You tell your kids, do your homework and be prepared. And then you have this outcome, and you have people putting children to bed tonight, and they're afraid of breakfast. They're afraid of, how do I explain this to my children? I have Muslim friends who are texting me tonight saying, should I leave the country? I have families of immigrants that are terrified tonight. This was many things. This was a rebellion against the elites. True, it was a complete reinvention of politics and polls, it's true. But it was also something else. We've talked about race. I mean, we've talked about everything but race tonight. We've talked about income. We've talked about class. We've talked about region. We haven't talked about race. This was a white lash. This was a white lash against a changing country. It was a white lash against a black president in part. And that's the part where the pain comes. And Donald Trump has a responsibility tonight to come out and reassure people that he is going to be the president of all the people who he insulted and offended and brushed aside. Yeah, when you say, you know, you want to take your country back, you got a lot of people who feel that we're not represented well either. But we don't want to feel that someone has been elected by throwing away some of us to appeal more deeply to others. So this is a deeply painful moment tonight. I know it's not just about race. There's more going on than that. But race is here too. We got to talk about it.
So, Dr. Nuno, if you just heard what was said there, the issue of African Americans and those who are seen as not the mainline guys, those in the minority, who will now be properly sidelined because of what we've seen per the outcome of the votes, is that a big concern, or is also part of the bigger narrative?
I think it is a big concern, and it also is part of the narrative as well. But I think that, I mean, obviously that was a very emotive speech, and obviously it's something that I can relate to. But you know, they say that, when you have a wound, it's better that it's exposed so that the healing can take place. As opposed to it being undercover and get more and more infected. So it's deeply hurting, it's deeply disturbing that, certain people, not only the African Americans, the Hispanics, etc., felt very alienated by a lot of the pronouncements that were made by Donald Trump and his supporters. But at the end of the day, we are where we are. Now is a process, and now is a time for Donald Trump to live out the words that he said in his first speech, or his acceptance speech, that he's going to be united. I'm not saying that I am fully convinced, because you can't be convinced on words.
The actions now matter.
Yes, he has to take steps, because America, as we've all seen, is deeply divided.
That's true.
That's the exposure that has happened.
Okay. Now, one thing I need to ask is this. Following the announcement this morning that Donald Trump is the next president of the United States, the markets reacted very, very unhappily with him. The fear, the panic isn't there. But do we have reason to really be afraid of this man?
To be honest with you, I mean, the markets do that. As I said, when you look at Brexit, that's what happened. Huh? But then they'll sort themselves out, and I think things will stabilize. But the point of the matter is that the American system is such a way that he will be almost forced to conform to an extent.
Okay.
Yeah. There's different checks and balances in place so that, some of the promises that he campaigned on, for example, building a wall between America and Mexico and making the Mexicans pay, he cannot single-handedly go through with that. So there's certain checks and balances in place that he must. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that, we have to be watchful. We have to be mindful, because
Mr. Trump.
Yes, policies can be initiated, and he has a majority in the Senate, etc., etc. So certain policies can be pushed through. That might work to the disadvantage of certain communities.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jemima Nuno, for joining us today, sharing your thoughts with us. I really hope that we could do some more, but we ran out of time. Thank you for your time this
thank you very much.
That's Dr. Jemima Nuno, an international relations expert, sharing his thoughts with us on the outcome of the American elections. We'll go for a short break now. We'll come back and quickly look at what's happening at the Electoral Commission, but we know that the disabled in society have some concerns. We'll look into them after the short break. Stay with us.